Oh, we'll just wait on, sorry. First thing I'm going to just mention, can I just remind everyone that I've got a couple calls regarding our speaker system, and I've explained that, we're researching it, however it costs dollars, and right now we're trying so many things to spend on or keep control. But anyways, if everybody just makes sure that when they're speaking, they actually speak into the speaker. And they also asked if I would clearly say Fred or Christine so that they knew who was speaking. So if you could just be really clear and clear, just make sure you got your mic, and hopefully that will solve the issues. So anyways, we'll call this meeting to order, and I want to just say congratulations to everyone on a huge success of Family Day throughout the valley. I've heard nothing but rave reviews about that. I actually went snowshoeing last night under the stars with Red Deer River Adventures. If you've never snowshoed, go do it. It was a blast. So first thing we'd like to do is 2.1, and we're going to swear Councillor Fred Makowacki in as the Deputy Mayor for the months of March and April of 2018. Sorry, Fred. I've only said your name a million times. So next meeting, I get Mr. Councillor Fred Makowacki sitting beside me. All right, we will carry on. Could I get on 5.1.1? Could I get a motion for the regular council meeting minutes of February 5th? Tony?
Forgive me, Your Worship, just a point of order. We need to do adoption of the agenda first.
Jeez, I always forget that. Jay, would you adopt the agenda, please?
I will move to adopt the agenda, Your Worship, but I do have a request for an amendment to add two in-camera items, if we could, please. A labor and a land issue.
All right, those are added. Anything else? Lisa?
Yes, she has to second.
Okay, you're seconded. All in favor? Carried. Now, could I have a motion for 5.1.1 regular council meetings? Tony, seconder. Fred? Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Okay, we will go down to 8.1.1 and we will call Daryl.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this bylaw 0817 was first brought to council last July of 2017. And this was a borrowing bylaw for the East Cooley lift station. So a bit of information, background on it. In East Cooley, they have their own separate, their own wastewater system there. So there's a wastewater treatment plant and there's a lift station that's right beside it. And basically the lift station takes the sewage that's down low and pumps it up so that it can go into the wastewater treatment plant and be treated. A number of years ago, the wastewater treatment plant was upgraded, but there wasn't enough money to be able to upgrade the lift station at that time. And the lift station is, I believe it's at least 25 or 30 years old. and it's starting to corrode. It's a metal case tube. It's starting to corrode. The pumps are starting to fail. So it's been one of these items that have been on our books for a few years. We've applied for grant funding for it in the past, and last year the provincial government, and it was the provincial government, I believe it was a 75-25 agreement was what we had applied for, and they basically said to us that there was a very low likelihood of us being approved for that funding based on the criteria of other projects ahead of them, but there was a Canada Building Fund grant at the time that was 50-50 funding, so if they put that forward on our behalf, they felt there was a good chance that we would actually be accepted for that, and it turns out we were. So the federal government is providing 50% of the capital funding. And that's where it's listed under as provincial grants. So that was through the provincial government. That's why it's listed as provincial grant. In addition, there was $200,000 for gas tax money that was dedicated for this project as well. And our portion of it, of the cost of this, was $485,000 for a total cost of $1.37 million. Now that's the consultant's estimate at the time. So we're not sure if that might be a little high. We think it might be a little high because I think that the project was probably incorporated a couple of things that we don't need to do. But nevertheless, we have to come up with $485,000 for this project. And so at the time, it was determined that the best thing to do was to borrow all of the money for this project as opposed to take money out of reserves. So there was a first reading done in July. We advertised it in the Drumheller Mail for 2 weeks in August, so we meet the requirements there. And then we'd had some discussions around: do we borrow? Do we use some reserves? We do a mixture of those two things. And that sort of just at that point we didn't proceed with anything else at that point. So now we're at a point where we are wanting to move forward on it. We do have a consultant that is selected and ready to go on the work. We put out an RFP for it. And so we need to bring back the bylaw to see whether or not how we want to pay for this work for us. So.
Jay?
I'd like to move second reading of bylaws 08.17.
Seconder Tom? Discussion? Jay?
Thank you, Your Worship. Really just a comment. I think anytime we can get crucial infrastructure completed in this valley with 2 other orders of government paying the majority of the costs, we should say yes, please, right away, please. And that's exactly what this is crucial infrastructure that's long overdue from my recollections of the earlier discussions. So before we have a critical failure, I'd love to see this project completed. And so I will be voting in favor of the motion.
Tom?
So has this gone out to tender? Is that what this figure is based on? Or it could go out to tender and the tender could come in less? Is that?
So it hasn't gone out to tender. All we've done right now is actually put out an RFP for consultant selection and selected consultants. So that's our first step. So this 1.37 was based on a previous consultant's estimate for the work that was anticipated at the time. Based on what we've seen come in for prices, and know that consultants tend to charge between 10 and 12% of consulting fees, I would expect that our costs could be lower than this. The one caveat is that the provincial grant of $685 is a 50-50 split. So for every dollar we save, they save 50 cents. So it's not that they pay the first $685,000 of it. It's up to $685. But if the project comes in at $1 million, for instance, their contribution is $500,000. And sorry, just to interrupt. Just the one part is that the expectation is that we would actually have this completed by the end of summer. So we would try. I think they were looking at sort of an end of July, August, Armia, something like that. So provided everything moves ahead with it. So.
Lisa?
Well, that was my question. Wondering how long they would be without sewage use in that community, or do you have an alternate method or mechanism for that collection?
What you try to when you do these projects, what you do is you take the old. You don't put the new lift station in the exact same spot as the old lift station. You put it beside it so that you basically do a flip over. So you're probably without sewage for 12 hours, something like that. So the amount of time it takes you to move pipe. So
It's actually hook in. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Daryl.
Anybody else? Jay?
If there's no one else, Your Worship, I'll just add, I believe that unfortunately, and with Barb not here, it's hard to confirm, the only other alternative for us, of course, would be to withdraw from reserve. And if memory serves, the wastewater reserve, which is what we're talking about here, is not in the shape to take a withdrawal of this magnitude. In that we've been trying to build that reserve because there are, it's particulates, there's some approval that is still, we're still not up to provincial standards, and we keep kicking it down the road, right? It's the solid residuals, or
it's residuals. Well, there's two different parts. Residuals on the water side, residuals management, but on the wastewater side, where we meet approvals, but we keep thinking we're going to be held at some point down the pipe, no pun intended, there will be some more stringent requirements for removal. And at that point, we're going to have to spend some significant dollars to upgrade the plant.
Millions of dollars. So taking out from the reserve for this project is why we were thinking about debenture in the first place.
And Barb knew you'd ask that question. So the budget, the reserves right now we're at 3.1 million in 2017, and with debenture payments and everything else, and a couple of small capital projects, we'll be at 2.8 million in 2018. So
is that wastewater or water altogether?
Just wastewater. Okay, that's just the wastewater side. So.
Christine?
Will this at all affect any other borrowing that we might be needing to do this year?
Well, it does affect borrowing to a certain degree because you do have a ceiling that you can borrow to. However, we do have some pretty good room in there for borrowing. You know, I think if we move ahead with flood mitigation and some of those things, that will certainly move our limit up higher. But with this part, we're still within our range to handle this without an issue. So, and then just one of the parts I should have explained earlier about borrowing for some of these capital projects. So if you have this life expectancy of this lift station is 25 to 30 years. So you would prefer to do at least some borrowing, so you're putting the cost of that lift station on the next generation, on the people that are going to use it in 20 years, as opposed to the people who've put the money into the bank account today. So it's a good practice to be able to do at least some borrowing all the time. So.
Anybody else? All in favor? Carried. So now I will call for a motion to have the third reading. Tony?
I would move that we continue on to do the third reading as well.
Seconder Lisa? Discussion? All in favor? Carried. Well presented, Daryl. Okay, we're going to move on to 8.4.1, and before I call a vote, let's have a discussion on the procedure of the bylaw. So, Daryl, can I ask you to help us out there?
Yes, Your Worship. So just, and I think we had this mostly right the last time. So when we do a first reading of a bylaw, you're supposed to do it without any sort of showing any favoritism. You're supposed to the whole goal of this is basically open it for discussion. And then, so there was, what you don't want to do is kind of show that you're leaning one way or the other with respect to how you could vote on this, or on any matter with respect to that. So it's supposed to open it for discussion, and then and I think at that time what we said is then we're going to go into public consultation with it, and then bring those comments back and incorporate those for the second reading. And that's still what the goal is to be able to do with this, is bring it back in a few weeks' time, or whenever Paul thinks that we're ready to go with it, to be able to incorporate all of the discussion once it's out for public consumption.
Okay, so to clarify, help me out here, Tom. So I'm going to call for a vote on the first reading. So can I have somebody make a motion on the first reading?
There's been a motion.
Okay, so there's been a motion. It was tabled, though. So it wasn't.
So you don't need to make another motion.
No, you just have to put that motion back on the floor. Motion 2019.25, Garbutt Lacker, move first reading of bylaw 0818, and we're just looking for the show of hands.
Okay, so can I call for a vote on the first reading? All in favor? Carried.
That's it.
Tom?
I just mentioned something just for the extensive audience's information. When we do a vote for a first reading of a bylaw, what we are trying to do is basically just get it out on the table so that then we can discuss it. People on council are not in favor of the bylaw necessarily. They're not in favor of the way it reads. There could be many different amendments and changes. It's simply putting it out there for discussion. So a lot of people in the audiences that we've had seem to be a little bit upset when the first reading of a controversial bylaw is held and it is passed. Again, this doesn't mean that anybody on council is voting in favor of the final bylaw. It's simply putting it out there so that we can then discuss it and analyze it and that kind of thing. So just for clarification, it's just a council procedural thing that we should do.
Jay?
If I could add to that, Daryl, you used the words "you're supposed to," and I think that's what all of council needs to be aware. That's what our procedure bylaw says. We own this bylaw. If we don't like that procedure, if we'd like to do things in a different way, then we're absolutely free to decide at some point we'd like to put the procedure bylaw back up for review and debate and discussion about whether or not we want to continue to do things that way. But as it stands right now, it's a process procedural issue that we were trying to address through all this conversation, not an actual issue relating to the bylaw itself.
Thank you for clarity, because that is clarity for many of us. So before we go on to our next item, I just want to personally thank Tom for being the deputy mayor for the past 2 months. You gave me some amazing guidance, unbelievably supportive. I honestly hit some issues where Tom was there for me, and he would listen to me and help me and give me direction. And it's just been an amazing past 2 months. And the people, he's attended meetings when I wasn't able to be there. He was at almost all the community meetings, and I just think he exemplifies a perfect deputy mayor. So thank you, Tom. I was just honored to work with you. So thank you, and I just wanted you to know that you just have no idea how helpful you were. So thank you. So I need a motion to go into camera. Jay? Seconder Lisa? All in favor? Carried.